Let's go down to Chris Uhlmann, our political contributor who joins me every Monday. Let's kick off this never-ending fight about net zero. I made the point at the top of the show, Chris. I think that the media focus on division and, yes, it's untidy and all of this stuff sort of misses the point. When you are in opposition, whether it's Labor or the Liberals, I want to see them debate the tough issues. I want to see them go through the yes and the no and the maybes, formulate a position and then either contest or support what the government's trying to do. I think part of the problem for the coalition is they have papered over this issue ever since the Glasgow meeting where they went out there with net zero. And frankly, getting to net zero, all these other milestones, they've now said that they can't support. The targets are not being met. The money's not there. The science is not there. And so I think this is a good thing. I see this as healthy, Chris.
Oh, yeah, and what I wish the media would do is focus on the government. Look, let's be honest, there is no way, shape or form that in the next 2 terms that the coalition forms government, so what their targets are essentially immaterial. But what we can see by looking around Australia is that the cost of the current program that's being run, and the only model that you need is your electricity bill, because we've seen prices rise, and when you look in your electricity bill, you'll see a government subsidy that keeps arriving. Over $6 billion now. When is the government going to get rid of that? If they've got any confidence that the prices are going to come down, they have to get rid of those subsidies. And when those subsidies go, people's power prices will reflect what's actually going on in the marketplace, other than one that's being disguised by their taxpayers' dollars being recycled back through their electricity bills. And the other thing too is the system is becoming less stable. Business is becoming harder and harder to do in this country. So if the coalition could just get its act together and focus on the government and everything that on an almost daily basis shows you that we are on the wrong track, then they actually could do some serious damage. But I think on the media front too, it is high time that the Australian media try to do the complex business of looking at what's actually happening here and telling the Australian people the truth. And the truth is this plan is not working. This is a road to nowhere.
No one is doing it the way we're doing it and as fast as we are doing it anywhere in the world. So you know, square this circle for me. Business joined with the government and our media company News Corp over the weekend saying that we've got to get out there and manufacture more things in Australia, and I couldn't agree more. But we are a high-wage economy and we are now a high energy cost country. We're not competitive. Business say make more things in Australia, but business are also out there, you know, in behind the government on net zero. But if you speak to them privately, you can barely find a business out there who wants more pain pressure, particularly on their power prices. And that's partly why they're leaving this country. So why don't they be honest as well, not just about the fiscal problems, the budget problems here, but also the engineering reality that they cannot do what Chris Bowen is trying to make them do by 2030, by 2035, by 2040, by 2050. Just can't be done.
Well, look, if you look at the record of the Business Council, I think you've already raised this, Peter, on industrial relations, what happened in the Albanese government's first term? Well, the Business Council and organisations like it got completely played. Everybody could see that coming. And Tony Burke took them for a ride and then changed the laws and made the wages bill in Australia higher for the people that are represented by the Business Council of Australia and the other business groups in Australia. They got completely played, and now they're on the same bandwagon with this. They don't want to be saying that they're against net zero because they believe that their membership or that, you know, the people that are funding their organisations don't want to hear that message. Well, you go into any small business, as I did the other night, by the way. I went to have dinner with Tony Abbott after the very successful launch of his book here in the ACT, and we asked the local restaurateur, well, tell us about the cost of your electricity bill, and he said in the last 2 years it's doubled from $2,000 a month to $5,000 a month. Plus, on top of that, they've got higher wage costs. So you add those things up, and in future, no one will be making anything in Australia, and we'll barely be able to have any businesses that are making any profits at all.
Yeah, I bet you couldn't, you know, double the price of the steak or the bowl of pasta or whatever you had to eat there, because otherwise you're not price competitive.
No, this is just it. And so there are two inputs really that really matter. One is the cost of energy and the other one is the cost of wages. And on those two fronts, I would say that the people who represented businesses in Australia have abjectly failed. And I'd like them to explain to me how the plan that they're backing is going to bring down the price of energy, because there is no evidence anywhere in the world that when we put high levels of wind and solar onto a grid that anything other than the price rise happens. That's the international experience. So I'd love to see how they think it's going to turn out any different here.
I nearly gagged on my Wheaties this morning. I was reading Chris Bowen in The Australian. Supposedly he penned it. It certainly had his name. I bet you it was written by somebody else. Nonetheless, there was an op-ed there claiming that small nuclear modular reactors, way too expensive, he says, would require too many subsidies. He says it's false hope. And he wrote that not one has been built in the Western world. What he doesn't tell people, Chris, is that just last week, the left-wing government in Canada, this is Mark Carney's government, announced plans to build 4 small modular reactors in Ontario. They're putting in $2 billion to do it. And in doing so, says Carney in the press release, we'll be the first G7 country to bring SMR technology online. And just one of these reactors, Chris, can power some 300,000 homes. I mean, this is the conversation we should be having. We are treating Australians like mushrooms.
Yeah, look at Bill Gates now. As TerraPower has cleared one of its environmental hurdles, is now in the process of getting towards the last part. And it's a very big process in the United States to clear all of those regulatory hurdles, but it's getting closer and closer. And frankly, I'd like a large nuclear reactor here in Australia because they're extremely useful. They last for 100 years and you can recycle the fuel. But this is the thing that gets me, Peter. When Chris Bowen or whoever his advisor is sitting down typing this and they say, well, what do we put in here? There's going to be vast amounts of government subsidies are going to be required for this. You think that anyone might pick us up on that? Because what's happening with the stuff that we're building? Didn't Ross Garnaut say that there's no large-scale wind or solar project at the moment that doesn't require enormous amounts of government subsidies? And don't we have a capacity investment scheme where we've hidden the amount of money that we're using from taxpayers to try and fund wind and solar schemes? So everything that Chris Bowen says essentially comes undone on the internal logic. You don't actually have to read very far through anything that he writes or anything that he says to come up against something which is, well, what do you think you're doing at the moment? You're building a vastly expensive system that actually is not going to function. At least with nuclear energy, we know it works.
And we're paying poor old punters for their power bills to try and shut them up at the ballot box. Hey, imagine you were in the room with Anthony Albanese and Premier Li, and they have this discussion about the RAF aircraft and the Chinese aircraft over the South China Sea. Do you think our boss whips out a baseball bat to hit the Chinese, or does he get out a wet lettuce? What do you think happened?
Look, I'm pretty sure the wet lettuce was out, and sort of it would be the, shuffling of seats and sort of like, about that stuff in the South China Sea. Like, we're international waters. We'd rather hope that you wouldn't try and bring down one of our planes because that might be a tad dangerous. I mean, let's look at the actual form of China when we talk. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't trade with China. We have to trade with China. We've outsourced absolutely everything that we need to make this country work. So obviously we've got to trade with China. But the other side of the coin is that it is undoubtedly a threat to our national security. It happens on a daily basis as they attack our infrastructure and they plan essentially what's the equivalent of virtual bombs. And now they're literally attacking our aircraft in the South China Sea. Now, this is a very difficult, I understand this is a very difficult road to walk, but I think that no one respects anyone who's weak. And there should have been a robust conversation, which is essentially this is completely unacceptable. And the only way I think to do that is to start calling the stuff out publicly. I think you actually do have to draw a line in the sand and use very strong public language to say, we're not going to put up with this. We're in international waters. Like, you've claimed most of the South China Sea. We dispute that. We're going to continue to run these exercises. Otherwise, we're essentially in some kind of retreat and eventually Chinese will get what they want and we will retreat from that part of the world.